Hey guys, welcome to my new YouTube channel and podcast, because I'm also, the reason why this microphone is hooked up is because I'm also considering making a podcast out of this. We'll see, TBD. My name is Amy. I'm 34 years old. I live in Colorado. And I have recently recognized that I am the victim of domestic abuse. And no, not physical domestic abuse. I actually, up until about a month ago, thought that domestic abuse was only physical. Obviously knew there were other types of abuse, but I didn't know that it could be considered, like, domestic abuse itself could be considered anything other than physical, but it can. And I guess right now I'm calling myself a survivor, which is still a little weird for me to say. Because I was never physically harmed, but the effect this situation has had upon my mental health would lead me to say that I'm a survivor, because I have had quite a few not a suicide attempts completely. I've had some moments where I have, gotten close to hurting myself or tried to hurt myself, but I would say mainly suicidal ideation and just really the overwhelming sense that I don't want to be here anymore. So with that in mind, I would call myself a survivor, because as of today, I'm still here. And I'm fucking proud of myself for that. The reason why I wanted to come and do this today, or in general, is because over the past several months, over the past year, I would say, year plus, I have been searching for a community and searching YouTube, searching Reddit, searching Quora, searching Facebook for people who are going through or have been through what I'm currently going through. And the resources that I found have truly saved my life. And that's not an exaggeration. So I'm hoping to be a resource for someone, and I would be remiss if I also, if I also didn't mention that this is, I'm hoping that this is also healing for me, further healing for me. I'm doing a lot of other things to guide my healing journey. I journal. I attend an in-person support group. I have an online support group. I, of course, have my friends. I'm in therapy weekly. So I'm doing the work, but I am also, and I'll get to this through my story, but I am very alone. I live, like I said, I live in Colorado, and I am from upstate New York, and the majority of my support system is still in upstate New York. So being out here in Colorado basically by myself has been really difficult. I lost my mom when I was 24, and So I don't have her here. You know, she was my best friend. She was my biggest cheerleader. And I know that if she was here right now, I know that she would have gotten on a plane in moments and flown out to be with me. But unfortunately, that's not the reality of my situation. And so I do feel really alone. I don't have a ton of family support, although my dad has really stepped up in the past couple months, which has been really amazing. And it feels really good. He and I have a very strained relationship, and he was estranged from me for years. So to have his support is, it's truly priceless right now. And I have some amazing cousins who, you know, who are just my landlines right now. So, that's been wonderful. And my friends are incredible, but I want to say for all of you out there who might be in a similar situation that I am, or maybe you have even less support than I do, I get it, and I feel for you. I'm with you. I see you and I hear you, and it's fucking hard, man. It's really tough when you go through something like this alone. And I want to say that if you are alone and you feel like you don't have much of a support system, that I hope that in some capacity you can try to create one. And I do know that when you are in the position that some of us are in, where it's hard to get out of bed in the morning and you're having a suicidal ideation and you're probably in a deep depression, like, it's so much easier said than done to just say, oh, get up and find a support system. But, and I know that, like, I want to validate that, but I also, there are resources. National Alliance for Mental Illness, NAMI, has resources on their website. They, you know, I would check your insurance for therapists, and, you know, there are Facebook support groups, which is what I'm in a couple Facebook support groups right now, which have honestly, like, when I first started, when my husband, my soon-to-be ex-husband's mental illnesses started really, really getting so much worse, that was kind of my first, that Facebook group was my first lifeline, truly. So yeah, so whatever you can do that. Ask for help from the people in your life. I think in America, sometimes we have this inclination, or, it's like, it's considered brave to, like, go through shit by yourself. And that's fucking bullshit, especially when you're dealing with domestic abuse and psychological abuse or physical abuse. Like, don't go through that by yourself. You shouldn't have to. You shouldn't pretend to be strong. Strength, I'm sorry, I said that wrong. Strength is reaching out when you need it. And so, yeah, that's what I want to say is try to create a community of people around you. What I'm realizing is that it's very common for our abusers to try and isolate us. So I think it's very common for women, and I shouldn't just say women, you know, people of all genders and of course men, like, are, you know, people of all genders experience abuse. And so, but I do want to say that oftentimes I think women or people who identify as women are often weaker, physically weaker than people who identify as men. And so when we're isolated like this, I think it's a little bit scarier for women. So I do, again, I just want to say, I do understand that you may be isolated and it may be very difficult to have a support system, but please do the best you can. I'll be your support system. You know, watch these, like, look on YouTube, look on Reddit. There are communities for people like us. And just to know that you're not alone, that other people who have experienced what we're experiencing is there's a level of comfort there. Okay, so now that all of that is out of the way, I'm gonna talk a little bit about my story. So oh geez, still trying to figure out this equipment. I don't know why this, okay. I met my husband when I was like 21, 22 years old. He was a close friend for a while. We partied a lot together in upstate New York, went to bars, went to clubs, drank a lot, mainly just like party friends. And then became a little closer than party friends, maybe towards the last year of our friendship before we started dating. And at the time I was dating someone else, and then we broke up, and then a couple months after that, my mom passed. And so that whole year before my ex and I started dating, we, you know, my mom was seriously ill with brain cancer. And so especially towards the last couple months of her illness, my ex and I got extremely close, and we did have like a hookup relationship. But, you know, I want to say that I was an extremely vulnerable person. And I do think he took advantage of that. At the time, I saw it as him being this knight in shining armor coming to save me. Now, after having been with him for 10 years, I recognize that that's his shtick. He loves to be the one to save you. He loves to be the savior. Even if he's the one hurting you, he loves to be the savior. But at the time, I just saw it as, wow, this person is so loving, and he's so he's taking care of me while my mom is ill, and then after she passed, he was like my rock, you know. And again, like at the time I thought it was wonderful, and now in hindsight I see it as him taking advantage of a really vulnerable and destroyed person. So that's where the story starts. We started dating. We said our anniversary was January 1st because we spent New Year's Eve together that year, and he told me he loved me before we were even like officially dating, which, if you know anything about certain mental illnesses and personality disorders in particular, it's something called love bombing is very common. I did not know this term back in 2012. 2012 to 2013. I didn't know what love bombing was. I had never heard it before. I had never, as far as I know, I had never been in a relationship like that before. So when I felt the love bombing and I experienced that, what I saw it as was, this person is my soulmate. This person like I said, told me he loved me before we were even officially dating. He took a loan out for a diamond necklace a month after we started dating, gave me this, very expensive, intricate necklace for Valentine's Day. Wrote in the card that he gave me on Valentine's Day that I was, like he was going to make me the happiest woman in the world one day, and made it seem like, we were going to get married and live this like happily ever after life. And I was I was shocked, but like in the best way. I was like, this is a person who, yes, I've been friends with him, but we've been dating for such a short amount of time, and he already knows he wants to spend his life with me. Like, this is just a dream come true. Like, it's a fairy tale. And it wasn't just the attention that I loved. Like, I was falling in love with this person. I was just head over heels for him. He was so kind to me. He would do such nice things for me. He would get me, flowers all the time and write me these little notes all the time. And, shovel, upstate New York, tons of snow, spend hours shoveling my car out for me every morning, make dinner for me all the time. Like, we spent every moment together that we weren't working. Like, it was literally heaven on earth. I'd never felt so strongly about someone before. I had never had anyone feel so strongly about me before. I thought we were a match made in heaven. And, that honeymoon period continued for a very long time. I will say, like, I've heard so many different stories from people regarding spouses of theirs who have personality disorders. And, it's common for there to be a love bombing and a honeymoon period. But I will say, I do think of the people that I've heard tell about their honeymoon period, like I had probably a longer one than most. Now, that being said, that does not mean that there were not red flags from the get-go, because there were. Within months, there were red flags that I just chose to ignore. That first year, so we moved in together like 5 months after starting to date. So, which is also like just ridiculous. Like, again, love bombing 101. Are you kidding me? So he asked me to move in with him, and I did. And, again, happily ever after, yay. But once I moved in with him, there were things that did kind of crop up from time to time, but it wasn't overwhelmingly so. It was intermittent. It certainly wasn't every day or even every week. And you have to remember that I was 24 at the time. This was my first time living with a boyfriend, and he had just love bombed me / was still love bombing me. And so I was so wrapped up in this thing, and there's so much dopamine in my brain telling me that, I was feeling so good all the time. So I was looking past these things. And also, again, being 24 years old, and him as well. I mean, he's like a little bit older than me, but like by months, like not by years. We were both very much still partying. So a lot of the red flags had to do with drinking. And so when you are young and you're still drinking, I feel like a lot of times you don't take them quite as seriously, because you're like, make excuses for the person. Like, well, they were drinking and, blah, 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 et cetera, right? And so a few of the red flags I experienced that first year after we moved in together were, one of the first ones was, I think this was two months after we moved in together. So the summer of that's the summer of that year. I was going to a festival with a few friends. It was like an EDM festival in upstate New York. And he didn't like EDM music, so he wasn't coming. And I was going with a group of guys, and it was an overnight festival, but it wasn't an overnight festival where you like slept. Like it was like an overnight festival where you partied all night long and listened to music the whole night, and you didn't actually like go to bed. And then you just like drove back the next day. So anyway, I was doing this, and one of the people that I was going to this festival with was one of his best friends since middle school, who was also at the time my best guy friend. And so I'm thinking to myself, this is gonna be fine. And my ex had an absolute conniption before I went. He thought it was so inappropriate that I was going with guys. He was extraordinarily jealous. I was shocked. I remember leaving that morning on terrible terms with him. He was so angry with me. I think he made all these threats and things and didn't really follow through on any of the threats, but I do remember him being extremely angry with me for several days. So again, first red flag, like the extreme jealousy, which is, again, can be very common with certain personality disorders. Side note, I didn't know that this person, and he didn't know either, that this person had any mental illnesses at the time, okay? So that's a disclaimer. He was not diagnosed with anything 10 years ago. So first red flag. Second red flag, and I'm going to miss some red flags telling you guys this, of course, because I will say now that I recognize that this person was abusive to me for so many years, there was a period of time where it's hard to explain, but my memories are coming back to me that were, I don't know if I want to call them repressed memories necessarily, but they, I didn't see them maybe as red flags at the time. So I didn't necessarily like consider really put them in the vault and think about them later. Like I saw them differently at the time. I didn't see them as a red flag. I just saw them as like, oh, this person isn't perfect and this is a flaw and it is what it is, right? But I do think to a degree, like your brain does kind of protect you sometimes. And there are things, in the past, since it's been mainly since I've kicked him out of the house and I've been alone, because I do feel like when you're still in the relationship, you have these rose-colored goggles on. And so now that he's out of the home and I'm by myself, it's like everything's just like rushing at me. So I just that's another disclaimer. Okay, so other red flag. I got extremely ill that year. I don't really remember what time frame this was, but I remember we were living in that apartment because I was on the bathroom floor for hours because I got food poisoning. So we went out to dinner and then we went to a movie and then we came home and he had plans that night. He was going to go out with friends. And I don't remember if I was supposed to go and I like decided not to, or I just the whole time had been, intending to stay home. But I remember starting to feel kind of off and being like, I'm going to stay home. So I remember being in bed and watching a movie and starting to feel really nauseous. And needless to say, I got extremely, extremely sick. It was food poisoning, which if you've ever had food poisoning from seafood, it is another level. Like I was so extraordinarily ill. I was on the floor of the bathroom for like 6 hours, couldn't get up, coming out both ends, like terrible. And he's out drinking. And I remember texting him and saying, babe, can you come home? I'm really sick. Like, I think I have food poisoning. I don't know if it's a bug or it's food poisoning or what it is, but like, I'm extremely ill. Can you please come home and take care of me? I don't know about you guys, but whenever, especially I'm like tummy sick, like I just want my mom, right? Like you just like, even, it doesn't matter how old you are. It's like, you just want your mom to take care of you. And like, obviously that wasn't an option for me. So I wanted my boyfriend to come home and take care of me. And, he would not leave the club. And I remember, and not even not leave the club, but like he walked in, I remember him coming home at 4 or 5 in the morning, you know, like not just being like, oh, I'm going to have a couple more drinks and then I'll come home at 1:30 or 2. Like, no, you came home at 4 or 5 because it was more important for you to party with your friends than to come take care of your very sick girlfriend. So we'll call that red flag number 2. Number 2. So then, again, same apartment, that winter. So this was probably, you know, at this point we had been together for maybe a year. We went out one night and it was, like I said earlier, upstate New York, lots of snow in the winter. Probably shouldn't have gone out that night in hindsight because it started like blizzarding while we were out in downtown. And, he had driven. And so he was always the driver for some reason, like for his friends and stuff. It was well known that my ex would just always be the driver. So this night was no different. So he drove us out, and to be fair, we lived extremely close to downtown, but it was still like, you know, a 5-minute drive or so. And I think at this point we had already had some conversations about his drinking and driving because I noticed it was a problem. I think I may have even, that reminds me, when we were just friends, it was a problem because there was a night where for my birthday and his friend's birthday, the one that I had said earlier was also like my best guy friend. We went, about an hour away to another city to party. And, at 4 o'clock in the morning, cause the bars in this city close way later than the bars in our city. They wanted to drive back to our city after partying and drinking all night long. And it, like I said, this city was an hour to an hour and a half away from our city. So getting on the highway and driving an hour after having drank all night, and I put my foot down and said no, but it was like this huge argument. We were up all night. My mom ended up this was when my mom was still alive. So this was like my 22nd birthday, maybe. And my mom came and, had to pick me up the next morning because they ended up leaving me at a mutual friend of theirs' house overnight because they had to go home for some, I don't know. It was like they wouldn't stay over, and like I just wanted to keep myself safe so I wouldn't drive home with them. Anyway, so his drinking and driving had been a problem for a while. And at this point, like I said, I know we had spoken about it a couple times. So we go out downtown, he drives us out there, and the end of the night comes and he insists upon driving back home. And I knew he had been drinking. I knew it was blizzarding. And I was like, no, like not a good idea. Like this, you know, our house is 5 minutes away. Let's figure out an alternative. Now, to be fair, this was pre-Uber. But there were, I remember I got a ride home with my friend, my best friend, because I didn't want, I don't remember exactly the situation, but I feel she hadn't been drinking or whatever. So I drove home with her, and he refused to leave his car downtown and pick it up the next day. So he drove his car separately home, and we were just in a humongous argument, and he would get just so hot-headed when he would get angry. And so I remember driving, so I believe he left before us. And so when my girlfriend and I were coming down the road towards our apartment complex, and it was like our apartment was down this like slight hill, his car was off the road, and he was like digging, like trying to dig it out. And and then he would get back in and he would like fishtail around. And I'm thinking to myself, he's drunk and he's in the middle of this main road in our city, and the cops are gonna come and they're gonna figure out he's been drinking. Like, this is so bad. And so I remember, I think I got out of my girlfriend's car and I was like, why don't you leave the car here? We'll go home and like, we'll get in the morning. And he like screamed at me. He was so angry with me. And he just wouldn't listen to reason. And like, I was, wrong. And, but I remember specifically about that night, how angry he was and how good, like that was one of the first nights where I experienced how good he was at shifting blame. And there's a term called blame shifting, which is a type of emotional abuse that is done by toxic people, meant to make it so that they don't ever have to take responsibility. And it's also a form of control, because while they're refusing to take responsibility, they are throwing all of it onto you. And so it's you start to feel responsible for everything, and like everything's your fault, because these people are typically, they're intelligent and they're extremely good at manipulating and doing it in such a way that is so believable, right? And I'll get into this on another episode, but I came from a broken home where my father was that way in a lot of ways. And so I was so used to taking blame for things. And so him doing that, I don't even think was necessarily, I didn't even see it as a red flag, because I was so used to people, and especially men, treating me that way. So anyway, that was red flag number 3 is what we're on for, whatever it is, of our first year being together. So let's see, right now we're at 33 minutes. I want these episodes to be short enough where you guys, I don't want it to be an hour, because, I don't know. I want you guys to be able to watch them and not have it take up all of your day. So I will, I'll kind of do these like short little episodes. My intention is to kind of tell my story, go through like the years of my story. And I'm not gonna, it's 10 years is not going to take very long, because there are just moments that really stick out to me that I'm going to talk about. And then within the past 2 years were when things really started going massively quickly downhill. And so the last 2 years will be a little bit more detailed, but the time in between is not going to be as detailed. But I'll talk to you guys about kind of the trajectory of our relationship, the big moments, the big red flags, the good moments too. Like I do want to, because I think I know I had this opinion. Like I think that there's this opinion out there where abusers are always terrible. And so like, why don't you leave at the first sign of abuse? But abusers are not always terrible. They are oftentimes really, like I said, they can be manipulative, but they can also be, like, I truly believe that my ex felt, I do think he loved me. I don't know if it was really a healthy love, right? But like, I truly believe that he loved me in the best way he knew how. And there were a lot of really beautiful moments throughout our relationship. And I want to say that, because I want to be as realistic as possible, for one. And I also, if you're listening to this or you're watching this and you've never been in an abusive relationship, I want you to get the right idea and the accurate idea of what it's like to be in an abusive relationship and recognize that not all of it is bad. And that's why it becomes so hard to leave, because you have all these wonderful memories and you have had all these wonderful moments with this person, and it's hard to figure out who they are, like who they truly are. Are they the good parts? Are they the bad parts? Of course, no one is good or bad, right? All good or all bad. Like there, most things are exist in the gray. So that's why I that was the reason why I just said that, because I just want I don't know. I want those of you who are listening and or watching this to recognize the truth of that. And maybe you will have a little bit more empathy if somebody in your life has gone through what I've gone through or what other people have gone through, and you don't really understand why that person hasn't left yet. So yeah, but thank you for tuning in to this first episode. It's probably going to take me a few to kind of really get my groove, because I've, again, just never done this before. So, but thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you next time.